1991. It was a Sunday afternoon. Our eldest son had just had his first Holy Communion, going to a Catholic school. And we went to a friend's place and we had celebration barbecue for lunch afterwards. I took all of our barbecue stuff and chairs, etc., out to the car to pack it into the boot of the car to drive home. And a drunk driver ran into the back of the car while I was packing the boot. He took me into the boot of the car and then he slid out of the back of the car, degloved me from just above the knee down to the ankle. Obviously, the leg was fairly well smashed. It ripped the artery out of the right leg. Some other people were there at the barbecue. Obviously heard the commotion, came out, and I was very fortunate. They stemmed the blood flow while ambulances came, and an ambulance, a couple of police cars blocked the roads and got me from Trinity Beach in Cairns into Cairns Base Hospital and saved my life. The doctors there worked on me for about 4.5, nearly 5 weeks in an attempt to try and save my right leg. They rebuilt it. I was having into theatre every second day where they were farming skin from other parts of my body to try and rebuild the leg. But unfortunately, the new artery in my right leg became infected. 4.5 weeks later, it blew. I dumped my blood in the bed. I extenuated, but again, they found me, fortunately, cut me in neck, groin, elbows, filled me full of blood again and got me back again. So I was particularly lucky a second time. That's how I lost my leg. I underwent first stage of osseointegration surgery on the 4th of July, 2012, so nearly 10 years ago. Back at that time, generally speaking, osseointegration was performed in a 2-stage process. First stage was reshaping the amputee's stump somewhat. It was cutting a hole in the end of the stump, boring out a femur on the above knee, and inputting a stem into the femur, and then closing up that wound and sending you on your way again for a month or so, just while that all healed and you got over the trauma of that first stage of surgery. You then came back about a month later, like I said, and the end of the stump was then opened up again, and an adapter is then inputted into the stem that's in your femur, and that comes external to the skin through a stoma being a hole in your skin, and an adapter is put on the end of that extension, and that's what a prosthesis attaches to. So in effect, the end product is your prosthetic leg is attached directly to your bone structure, independent of surrounding skin, etc. From the time I lost my leg, became an amputee, the company I was working for relocated myself and my family to Sydney. There I was under a particularly good prosthesist who made fabulous prosthetic legs for me, sockets, and I was more than happy with what he did for me for many, many years. And then in early 2012, when the gentleman made me a new socket, my skin reacted to the silicone that the socket was lined with. I couldn't stand having it on for any longer than 5 or 10 minutes. So we went back to the drawing board, utilised silicone from various manufacturers, and found that my skin had just decided that it didn't want to have silicone against it anymore. It had had enough. So I was a little bit buggered. I didn't have a prosthesis to wear. It's then that I heard about osseointegration and looked into that process and elected to head down that stream so that I could be mobile. My above knee socket suspended prosthesis. That socket worked for me extremely well for many years. I returned to work fairly quickly. I was working 10-hour shifts where for 10 hours I was mobile, walking around, managing a business. And the socket did me no disservice for many, many years. And I must say that we were in the tropics. We were living in Cairns in the tropics at the time. So even with the heat and the humidity, that socket worked extremely well. It wasn't until the skin became intolerant to the silicone, or all the silicons, that I then went down the osseointegration track. The difference there is, of course, there is no contact with the skin with any of the supporting nature of osseointegration. It's purely supported on the bone structure, which, again, living in the tropics and working in the tropics, it was a whole lot more comfortable, especially in the humidity, etc., of not having that socket containing your stump and sweating in there profusely. That just doesn't happen. The benefits are no socket, bottom line. You're bearing your weight through your bone structure, so it's a more natural feeling of that prosthesis hanging under your skeleton. The benefit of that is what they call osseo-perception. In actual fact, you can feel the ground under your prosthetic leg, and you know the difference between carpet or tile or timber. I can feel that subtle difference through the prosthesis because it's attached to my skeleton, to my bone structure. And by the same token, because it's attached to the bones and my skeleton, my brain knows where my prosthesis is in space without me looking down. The same as it does for your sound leg on your meat leg, if you want to put it that way. So they are the prime differences. Obviously, on top of that, it's things like with no socket, you're not restricted, or you're not uncomfortable sitting in hard chairs. You can sit on a bicycle seat and push a bike along with comfort, where you can't do that with an above-knee prosthesis. You don't wear your pants out because of the pressure points. When you fly on an aeroplane and you've got a socket-based prosthesis and your body tends to want to swell up a little bit, you can't take the socket-based prosthesis off because your body's going to swell and you may not get it back on again. With osseointegration, of course, there's none of that issue. I don't know that I've covered all of there's probably other benefit. Oh yeah, another benefit is with osseointegration, it's very easy to have a shower leg or a water leg or a wet leg, depending on what you call it. And that's just a basic prosthesis with no electronics in it that attaches to your osseointegration and allows you to stand up and walk and stand on two legs in a shower and jump in a swimming pool, swim around and walk up the steps to come out. And I don't own crutches. I haven't had crutches for many, many years. There's no need to have crutches. There's no need for a shower chair. I just stand on two legs in the shower like the majority of the population. Negatives, there's not too many negatives. The biggest negative that majority of people ask up front is, okay, you've got a stoma, you've got an open wound. What about infection? And I put my hand up and say, yep. I had 6 or 8 infections in the first year that I had osseointegration, and that's skin infection. Similar to say for instance, you had your ears pierced and the piercing becomes infected. It's the same sort of thing. But I needed oral antibiotics for those 6 or 8 times. Then a hippie daughter-in-law of mine heard about oregano oil. And this is not something that the surgeons or any surgeons or doctors can talk about because it's untested. It's not from a pharmaceutical drug company. But oregano oil, about 8 or 10 drops of oregano essential oil in about 100 mils of water in a little spray bottle. And I have a shower and turn the water off and I spray around the stoma after shaking that oregano oil up in the spray bottle, and I have not had an infection in 9 years now. 9 years. So there are ways around it. Yes, infection is always a possibility. It can be managed. Another negative of osseointegration is it's certainly not recommended that you'll jump into a swimming pool with a whole bunch of little kids that might be peeing in there, or jumping into stagnant water, etc. For the same reason, you've got an open wound. Why would you open yourself to the possibility of infection getting in? Yep. Other than that, all right, another negative. The vast majority of osseointegration patients, the stoma itself actually dries up as such in the first 6 or 12 months after osseointegration. My stoma has remained open, and by that what I mean is my stoma does leak body fluid. Now, we're not talking about bleeding or anything like that. Just a clear body fluid, like 15 drops out of an eyedropper per day. But for that reason, I wear a little pad to catch that so it doesn't get on my pants or get on the bed sheets, which my wife wouldn't like. You do have the connector that comes external to your skin that the prosthesis connects to, and that is a piece of metal, as you would imagine. That does have some sharp edges on it, and you have to put a cap over that when you're in bed so you don't cut the bed sheets or cut your spouse. The advice I would give is to arm yourself with knowledge. There are a number of sites on the internet with regards to osseointegration. Just be careful and make sure you're not onto a dental osseointegration, you're actually onto a bone structure osseointegration. Some of the sites can be negative towards osseointegration, and generally speaking, that's from people that have not tried osseointegration, if you like, and don't like the look of it. I certainly have a good friend of mine who is an amputee, and if he looks at my osseointegration, he almost throws up. He just doesn't like the idea of it. And that's not to say he doesn't like the positive possible results. He just doesn't like the idea.